Hey guys, it's Paul, combat veteran, MMA fighter, YouTuber, and today we are checking out SODA's other viral hit because SODA's he's a hit maker, man. He's like the Drake except without the weirdness of Warhammer40k fan films. Um, is Drake still big? I don't know, man. I listen to dumb music. Anyway, point is, we're checking it out. It's called Siege. It looks awesome, and we are going to get into it. But before we do, if you too think that being a Dreadnought might not be bad, but being a Knight would be awesome, hit that subscribe button. And of course, like the video, and anything I miss or that isn't covered, or that's just lore related that helps explain things, man, always let me know in the comments. I love reading them, and that's probably, you guys are the #1 source of me learning new stuff about Warhammer. And yeah, check out my second channel, check out my Instagram, and most importantly, merch. It's in. You can see it is someone who is, for copyright purposes, not at all a Deathcore of Krieg member. It is just a generic guy in a gas mask modeled after yours truly, but he is sipping a cup of coffee because even in the 41st millennium, coffee is what sustains us. Okay, having done that, let's get into it. Okay, I just want to point out, there's a lot of people that have a theory that SODAZ, because he's Korean, actually did serve in his country's military because all Korean men are required to. And seeing some of those little details makes me think that's the case. Did you notice how he had, even though I think it may be, well, it's not las cannon fire because it had the report of like an autocannon, chuck, 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 chuck. But every, at least in modern weapons, often every third or every fourth round is tracer. And that lets you see the trajectory that your rounds are making. And it's really useful when you're shooting over great distances. For me, I think of the classic weapon being like a 50 cal, which can shoot, 2,000 meters. But they have, at that distance, they actually do travel in an arc. And so sometimes you do have to walk your fire onto the target, and having those tracers can be really useful for doing that. So again, a little detail that it looks like SODAZ got right. Also interesting, he kind of gets the audio mix right for that distant concussive blast. The way that often explosions at a distance aren't so much, they're not loud and like sharp. They're more like a thud that you feel, just sort of an interesting fact. Okay, did you notice how this is how I think of modern tanks are used in urban warfare? Exactly what you just saw, right? So there's a building, and the light infantry needs to breach it, but maybe in the building they either need to open an entrance because the usual door is blockaded, or there is an enemy like a machine gun nest or something, and so they bring the tank up, the tank shoots into it, blows up either like a hole in the wall from which your light infantry can enter, kind of from an unexpected direction, or you take out that machine gun nest and then your light infantry push in and take the building. So again, tactically sound stuff from our boy SODAZ. Okay, so you notice that the Space Marine did a, what we think of as a breach and clear. Obviously, when you got power armor, you just kick down the door. He took this hard left, That's absolutely a technique that some units use. The only thing that I do find sort of, a little detail that's a little sketch is that he walked in, turned the corner, immediately started engaging targets, but he stopped. He was stopped in the doorway, so his buddies behind him couldn't continue to filter in and clear the rest of the room, right? Because you got to think, he pivoted in, looked down into the corner, but he didn't clear the guys to the left or right or even behind him. He was relying on his battle buddies to do that. But if he stood in the middle of the doorway, of course he couldn't really, they couldn't get through, couldn't get past him. Okay, that's pretty sick. Just the Space Marines just sort of chilling there in the dropship. Thankfully, there's only in probably 25 years, there has been, I think, 2 combat drops of like paratroopers dropping into hostile territory, at least en masse. I think a lot of Navy SEALs and Green Berets doing direct action stuff, I think they enter sometimes via parachute. But honestly, even with them, I think mostly they do helicopter insertions and then they just hump it, 6 miles, 10 miles to their target. But, in World War II and even in Vietnam, you would see paratroopers that would have to enter. They'd be in the belly of their C-130. They would hear anti-aircraft fire. The enemy would be engaging them, right? It was called a hot DZ, and they would have to drop, land, and fight. And it sounds terrifying to be in a flying metal coffin while everything explodes around you. Sounds just awful. And thankfully, the only example, I think the 173rd dropped into northern Iraq, but that was not a hot DZ. The military prefers to have someone on the ground, like a smaller force, and secure not like a town, but just secure literally like an airfield sized piece of territory that the rest of the unit can drop onto. Okay, so kind of interesting. Their dropship did the same thing as what in the U.S. military we call pathfinders, right? Those are, like we said, the guys that go ahead, identify a good drop zone, make sure it's cleared of debris, secure it, obviously, and then once it's secured, then the larger unit of paratroopers drops in. The Space Marines just took their pathfinders and replaced them with a big gun. You see, they decided to make their own drop zone by shooting a hole right through the center of their target building and flying into it. I guess in the 41st millennium, that seems like a way more efficient method. So again, as we've talked about in other videos, usually when you have this sort of boarding on a drop pod, kicking down doors, charging into a ship, it's what we think of as a raid, right? They're going after a specific objective in that ship. They are there to seize it, and often this is followed by a withdrawal. Again, I don't know if, based on how the ship's sort of inserted, if they're going to withdraw via the dropship. I feel like they're more likely to exfil out of the building with their target item, or having done what they set out to do, exfil out of the building and link back up with their friendlies. It seems like there's some friendly ground troops, maybe that's the tank and light infantry that were pushing into the lower part of the building, right? This would make tactical sense, right? So you have your Space Marines fly in, hit them right in the the 10th floor or whatever, and go surgically right after their target. Meanwhile, your infantry and armor assets are going to be pushing through the first floor, slogging it out, clearing their way up, and of course you guys will have to meet in the middle, which is tactically pretty tough. But again, I'm assuming that if you're an 8-foot tall Space Marine, with some pretty distinctive, or a Chaos Space Marine in this case, with some really distinctive spikes, the chances of confusion are not too high. But again, urban warfare, they cut the lights. Everybody knows the guard doesn't have any night vision. They don't have anything. So they still may have to kill some of their own guard. But I feel like if you worship the forces of chaos, like being really meticulous to avoid friendly fire is probably like pointless. Okay, I noticed that the Dreadnought has the black and white stripes that, of course, in the modern world means hazard. Usually they don't mean, like on construction equipment, it's like, don't step here, be careful, this part of the machine swings. I don't know, in lore, is there a Chaos Space Marine chapter that will have that sort of striping effect? Does it mean something different? Because if not, I think it's hilarious that a Chaos Space Marine Dreadnought is just letting those technicians know, hey man, be careful, this part swings. Oh no, there it is on the shoulders as well. Okay, so it must be a symbol of their chapter. Okay, see actually, this is a really good illustration of a flanking maneuver. You may not have picked it up, right? So the dropship drops, out comes the Dreadnought, and the Dreadnought starts engaging those targets, right? The targets get behind cover, and they start shooting back, right? And they've got tunnel vision on it. And the Dreadnought's pretty impressive. Like, he's really keeping those guys' heads down. You know, they're literally afraid to poke up to shoot at him. And that is exactly what we talk about when I talk about suppressive fire, right? The enemy the fire is so overwhelming, and that the suppressed forces, in this case it looks like Imperial Guardsmen, are literally like scared to put their head out. But they're behind cover, right? So the Dreadnought can't punch through their cover, but that's why the other Space Marine, or maybe two, right, went around the side and then pushed in from the side where their cover is totally ineffective, and their attention, they're not even paying attention to their left and right. They're just focused on the Dreadnought. That's exactly how a classic flanking maneuver should go, and exactly why it's so effective. Okay, so it looks like the Chaos Space Marines went after the generator. So again, if indeed I'm correct, and on the lower levels, the Chaos-aligned forces are trying to push up and clear up the building, then this would make a lot of sense, right? I assume much of the building's defenses are automated. Obviously, the lights, turning off the lights, all of the things being equal, would not favor the attackers, because the defenders know the layout, the attackers don't. So plunging them into darkness, like, it doesn't really help anybody, but it's just a tiny bit favors the attackers. But again, if you have automated defenses, that could shut them down. If they don't have battery backups, which by the 41st millennium, I hope we're using battery backups for things. Oh, there we go. A backup generator. Called it. Okay, so this is an example of something that's probably realistic in lore and sort of realistic in the real world, but not actually tactically sound. Okay, so if you're going to do a defense of your final objective, right, the most valuable objective, the one you can't allow to be seized by the enemy, right, you would not want to disperse your forces in two lines. Right, because to me, what would make the most sense, right? It looks like they cleared the guardsmen, and once the guardsmen were eliminated, then they ran up against the Imperium's Space Marine chapter. But again, and we know that like every military service that has a rivalry with their sister services, Space Marines and Guardsmen kind of hate each other, right? But to optimize things tactically, right? What would you do instead? You'd say, hey, we have these Space Marines. They have these shields that are effective cover, and they would say, okay, Guardsmen, you're going to be behind the Space Marines, and you're going to put lasgun fire, and most importantly, our largest weapon is going to be behind that shield wall. And that way, the weapon can go pump rounds into the Dreadnought. Its crew are going to be protected by the shield wall, and your most powerful, your most well-armored force is going to be front and center, right? As it stood here, it was just a mess. It was just tactically, right, they shouldn't be that far apart. Okay, so they are right on top of that objective. Again, they may not have had a choice, but usually you don't want to defend your final objective in the room. In the room of the final objective. Again, the thought process being that, like, if it was like a TOC, right? This is like fighting. A TOC is a tactical operations center, like a command post. This is like trying to defend your command post from an attacker that's already inside the command post, right? So like the command post is in a way already been seized, and so why would you mount your defense there? Right, you want to mount it just a little bit outside, right? Just a little outside of the command post and say, okay, this is our final line, because if the final line falls, you've got 2 minutes to say, hey, command post is compromised, everybody out. You can at least get some people and get your most valuable intelligence and items out. Plus, like we see here, the friendly fire risk or the collateral damage risk is so high, Again, if they had defended a little forward, and reality always gets a vote, you may not be able to, then they could say, hey, listen, tech priests, we're going to radio you when things have gone to shit if we're gonna lose this line. And when we do, you've got 2 minutes, the two of you, pack your stuff and get out, right? Or get out with the most valuable things and stop packing everything up. But instead, now they just let one of their guys get killed, right? That's 50% of their ability to move anything. That was dumb. That was dumb. Get back behind cover, dude. I just have a hard time with the idea that, that the Imperium has built a las cannon so miserably ineffective that it functionally does nothing, right? It appears to have no meaningful effect on the Chaos Space Marines, but we still equip them with it, right? I get it. You gotta mass produce it, and that's all fine and dandy. But you think they would engineer a grenade or some sort of secondary weapon, and maybe they don't field it to everybody, but even just something where it's hey, we're just giving you a bolter, but it's a 2-person crew-served weapon on a tripod. It's a crew-served bolter. At least then they could mount some sort of meaningful defense instead of using this very large weapon that doesn't. It's one shot. It's like an artillery piece, right? You shoot it and then you reload it. But that's not any more effective than the Space Marines bolters or their hammers. You really can't design a better weapon than a big hammer. Okay, bro, sure. Yeah, again, the hammer just crunches right through power armor, but the vast majority of Imperial Guardsmen cannot get any weapon system that can engage a Space Marine in any meaningful way. Yeah, I just can't believe that. again, we know the Guard, we know the the Death Corps of Krieg. They have these explosive tipped lances. Then why not just take those explosives and do it as a grenade? You know. All right, guys, interesting. Definitely realistic, the fact that the Space Marine at the very end attempted to destroy the valuable. I'm going to assume it was like intelligence. But that's actually really common. That's something that you should definitely do if you think that a command post or an item is going to fall in the enemy hands. You want to do your best to get rid of it. There was even an example, the soldiers that were killed in Nigeria, I want to say 3 years ago, when the remainder of their team thought they couldn't withdraw any further than they had. They formed a perimeter, and they actually buried all their electronic devices. And they actually wrote, like, supposedly, like, notes to their family on them, and then buried them with the idea that they would become unusable. But the U.S. friendly forces would be able to recover the data on them, whereas the enemy wouldn't really be able to do that sort of like in-depth repair. And so, yeah, they had also like wiped their radios and deleted everything, and really, again, did that in expectation that they would be captured. All right, congratulations, guys. Those of you that have made it to the end, I sincerely appreciate it. You guys make this channel what it is. And yeah, let me know in the comments, again, if there's lore explanations for some of the things I saw. And of course, let me know in the comments what other videos you want me to check out. And yeah, until next time, have a good one.